Hope everybody had a good week.
I mean, we usually
A little warm this week, but not totally unbearable. So we're going to jump right back in. We're right in the middle of the drama here in Exodus. So we've got our summary from last time that we put together. So we'll start with that. That was frogs and gnats plague Egyptians and Hebrews alike. But then the flies, the death of the livestock in the fields, and terrible boils attack only the Egyptians. The Egyptian priests and their gods quickly fall short of power, and Pharaoh seems to relent, but instead his heart is hardened. And our summary was, frogs, frogs, and more frogs. And the magicians did the same again. Pharaoh begs Moses to take away the frogs. Moses cries in great distress to take away the frogs. God takes away the frogs, but their bodies remain. Pharaoh's heart hardened. Then we get gnats and lice, and the magicians could not replicate, and they say, this is the finger of Elohim. Flies and scarabs come next, but they don't affect Goshen this time. The Pharaoh says, if Yahweh is here, just worship him here. Moses responds that Egypt would stone us because these are their gods. And the livestock plague was the livestock only in the field died. Then the Pharaoh lied, and the Pharaoh lied, and the Pharaoh lied, and the Pharaoh lied, and then we got boils. So that is going in bucket number 3. Okay. So, now, our title for this week, I think got it from Mike this week. Thank you, Mike. Exodus 9:13 through the end of chapter 11. So if you guys want to turn there. The title was, God sends destructive hail, devouring locust and heavy darkness upon Egypt. Pharaoh continues to lie to get his way, but his heart continues to be hardened. God's final plague is revealed, so a distinction will be made between Egypt and his Israel. So what happens? Starting in 9:13.
hail.
Hail. I'm going to write it in big letters because it was big hail.
Have you seen the Exodus movie?
I don't think so.
One of your pictures last week that had like the fish in the water
Yeah?
was from a movie called Exodus.
No, it
Gods
wasn't
and
because
Kings.
I made it in
Really?
AI. Yeah.
It looked like exactly from that, but yeah,
Maybe they took it from him.
Yeah. Maybe.
it is very, very wrongly portrayed. The movie,
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm glad not that sad that I haven't seen it.
but
Okay, so what happens after hail? Locusts. Okay. And what?
Well, in between their Pharaoh lighting.
Good point. Oops. I keep misspelling Pharaoh every time I write it. The O goes on the end, which makes no sense.
I mean, I guess it could be difficult to pronounce if you.
What then what do we get?
Heavy darkness.
Hmm?
Was it the heavy darkness?
Yeah, heavy darkness.
that you can feel.
That's right.
So would have, I mean, darkness that you feel would, in that case, would candles have worked?
No.
Fire, anything? Is
I
just
think that was the point. They said they had no light. They couldn't see each other. They couldn't get out of their houses. So it was a darkness that if you tried to light a candle, no light came. So that's why the fog analogy I think fit the best for me, is that there was actually stuff in the air. It was just pitch black and
The darkness was a response to Pharaoh saying, Ra is going to get you.
yes. Thank you. Very good. Pharaoh.
And then an interesting note about the darkness, that there was a major volcanic eruption in the Mediterranean around that time too. So it could have been volcanic fallout, which...
Yeah, but it would have had to have been volcanic fallout right at the border of Goshen.
There's evidence that something like that might have happened.
Yeah, I'm not one that goes towards the naturalistic explanations for the miracles, because it's like, you have to have a miracle anyway, so the text says it happened. How he did it didn't say, so anybody's guess, but it absolutely did not have to be some natural phenomenon. So, heavy darkness that you can feel, and I'm going to say that is as an attack on the supreme Egyptian god of the sun, Ra. So he's like, Ra's gonna get you, and then he gets Ra. Very good. And then what? After the darkness.
The final plague is threatened.
Firstborn will die. Alright, I think that's about everything, right? Yeah.
And it's not gonna be selective as far as just Egyptians, it's the whole land. I think you said last week to make a distinction.
Yeah. Okay. That look good to you guys? Okay. Okay. Alright, so we are going to jump back in. Now first, since we've basically finished the first 9 plagues here, we've gotten through the bulk of the interesting natural phenomena. We've got the firstborn plague coming. It's going to take a little while. I thought now would be a good time to see the fractal of the plagues, because there's one more time in the entire history of the world that God is going to do plagues. And it comes in Revelation. We actually get 14 plagues. There are the 7 trumpet judgments and the 7 bowl judgments. So I just want you to feel and see how fractal this is. Let's go read Revelation 16. And I just want you to pay attention to how many things in Revelation 16 sound an awful lot like what we just read happening to the Egyptians. Revelation 16. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple telling the 7 angels, "Go and pour out on the earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God." So the first angel went and poured out his bowl on the earth, and harmful and painful sores came upon the people who bore the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. The second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and it became like the blood of a corpse, and every living thing died that was in the sea. The third angel poured out his bowl into the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. And I heard the angel in charge of the waters say, "Just are you, O Holy One, who is and who was, for you brought these judgments, for they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. It's what they deserve." And I heard the altar saying, "Yes, Lord God the Almighty, true and just are your judgments." The fourth angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and it was allowed to scorch people with fire. They were scorched by the fierce heat, and they cursed the name of God who had power over these plagues. They did not repent and give him glory. The fifth angel poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast, and its kingdom was plunged into darkness. People gnawed their tongues in anguish and cursed the God of heaven for their pain and sores. But they did not repent of their deeds. The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up, to prepare the way for the kings from the east. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs. For they are demonic spirits, performing signs, who go abroad to the kings of the whole world to assemble them for battle on the great day of God the Almighty. Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake, keeping his garments on, that he may not go about naked and be seen exposed. And they assembled them at the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. The seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne, saying, "It is done." And there were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a great earthquake such as there had never been since man was on the earth. So great was that earthquake. The great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And God remembered Babylon the Great, to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. And every island fled away, and no mountains were to be found. And great hailstones, about 100 pounds each, fell from heaven on people, and they cursed God for the plague of the hail, because the plague was so severe. Water into blood, boils, frogs, hail, darkness. In the first 7, there's also locusts, but they're like hell spawn locusts out of the pit that come up, and they have like faces of men. We've got nearly every plague represented here at the end of time. And if you remember, I said, in our story, God says hello to humanity. His first interaction with the bulk of humanity after the flood is plagues. And he says hello with plagues, and he says goodbye with plagues. That's the God that we follow. So I just thought it's interesting. It never really dawned on me when I read Revelation before that we're just getting a repeat of these plagues. Just more intense, more of them, but it's the same plagues. Okay, so now we'll go back to Exodus chapter 11. Well, at chapter 12. We finished chapter 11 last time, but I'm going to be honest, we were climax of the drama. Like Pharaoh and Moses are having this argument. Pharaoh has just told Moses, if you come here again, I'm going to kill you. You will not see me again. And Moses is angry. So just to recapture a little bit of that drama, we're going to start back on verse 4 of chapter 11. So verse 4, Moses turns back around to Pharaoh right before he goes, and he says, "Thus says Yahweh, about midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt, and every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the slave girl who's behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle. There shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there has never been, nor ever will be again. Not a dog shall growl against any of the people of Israel, either man or beast, that you may know that Yahweh makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. And all these your servants shall come down to me and bow down to me, saying, Get out, you and all the people who follow you. And after that, I will go out." And he went out from Pharaoh in hot anger. And then Yahweh said to Moses, "Pharaoh will not listen to you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt." Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, and the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the people of Israel go out of his land. So the creator of the universe just told Moses, and Moses told Pharaoh, "I am coming. And when I come, there's going to be death everywhere. And it's going to be terrible." And the suspense here has been building for weeks, right? All these plagues, all these things going on. The suspense is at its peak. Yahweh just took down Ra, right? We talked about that. We just took down the supreme Egyptian god. And now, an interlude for a set of rules. Chapter 12. Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month every man shall take a lamb according to their father's houses, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his nearest neighbor shall take according to the number of persons, according to what each can eat. You shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male, a year old. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight." So they get instructions about a calendar. They say you got to pick a lamb 4 days in advance, and then you got to kill it. So on the 10th you pick the lamb. On the 14th day of this month, they call this month today Nisan. It's the Babylonian name for that month. And so on the 14th day of Nisan, you have to, on the 10th day you take it, 14th day you kill it. So Dennis Prager made this point that it didn't fully stand out to me when I was reading it. Why in the world did we break the climax of the tension here? Why did we go from the peak to this story? And I don't think Dennis's answer was necessarily right, but I think his point was exactly correct. It has to be important. The whole story up to now was building to here. Now we stop to talk about the rules of Passover. What is the issue that is so central that it supersedes the storyline's central drama? And the answer to that question is memory. God is telling us here that the Hebrews have to understand that he is not taking them out of Egypt until they know that they will have to remember this moment for eternity. These are, in fact, the only rules given to Israel in Egypt, is about the Passover and the calendar and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So it turns out the important part of Exodus was not the plagues. It was the Passover. The important part of Exodus is the ritual that's going to come out of it. That's why we stopped the story in the middle for the ritual. And that's why we put it right here at the peak of the climax. We're actually going to spend more text in here on the Passover of the ritual than we are on the actual killing of the firstborn. It's just a couple paragraphs. So there's an awful lot of things that we can learn from this. And the first one is that since God is effectively saying, I'm not taking you out of Egypt until you learn that memory is what matters here, that their freedom is secondary. Freedom is an important part of the Exodus, but it's secondary to the purpose. The purpose in all this is for them to be the conduit through which the world will learn who Yahweh is. And if their freedom was the paramount thing, the story would have just continued on. He'd have taken them out, and once they got out and all the danger was gone, now I give you how you're supposed to remember this. But that's not how he did it. Before I will ever take you out, you have to remember it. So I once heard an interview with a guy. I have his book, but I haven't finished reading it. But I heard the interview like 10 years ago. The name of the book was called My Life Deleted. He was actually a pro football player who was no longer playing football. He had a private jet business. One day he goes into work and he was in early before everybody else, and he had to go to the bathroom, so he walks into the bathroom. Something's on the floor in the bathroom, and he slips, he falls backward, and he hits his head on the floor. And he wakes up with one of the worst cases of retrograde amnesia on record. That one little moment of nothing. And when he woke up, he described it as, it was fascinating to me because you don't know what that would be like. And so you can hear from this guy, he remembers perfectly what it was like waking up. He described it as, I knew what a father was, but I didn't know that I was a father. I knew what a wife was, but I didn't know that I had a wife. I knew what a husband was, but I didn't know that I was a husband. And so when you heard his family relate this, he was a different person. It wasn't the same man. His wife had to fall in love with a completely different person. He had a few of the same mannerisms, but the loss of the memory meant the dad and the husband they had before was dead, and he was gone. And this was a completely different individual. And it hit me really hard listening to that, to realize that I am my memory. You take my memory away, and I am not me anymore. Right? It is our memory that makes us who we are. And that's why when you doom scroll on your phone for hours and you put your brain in zombie mode, you have no memory of that time. That time passes, and it is gone. When you watch television for hours on end, you have no memory of that time. You remember that you watched television for 2 hours. There's no real memory. You are literally killing yourself. If memory is your life, you're killing yourself for that period of time, willingly, just to get a break, or because you can't avoid scrolling the phone. And it's the same with nations. And that's why God stops here and says memory is the most important part. You are not a nation if you don't have a memory of what it meant to be a nation. The United States is not the United States if we forget how we got here. Israel is not Israel if they forget how they got here. And you can see this now before your very eyes. Like every generation has forgotten a little more and a little more and a little more about what the United States is even about. And now very few people in our country even know our history, and even fewer value it. And so when that's gone, we will no longer be a nation. We'll be a place, but we won't be the nation of the United States of America. So we learn something else about God here, and that is that he does not intend to act twice. History is a fractal, but it is not cyclical. We're going to see more plagues later, but they're going to be different. God does not intend to do a miracle in every single generation. He intends to act one time. You're going to write it down, and you're going to remember it. And that's why we have this here today. God does not intend... You may wish that he did miracles every single generation. I wish he did. Then we'd have a lot more knowledge that God exists, and he's here, and he's acting in history. I wish you could see those miracles every time, but that's not the God we follow. The God we follow says, when I act, your job is to remember it.
As bad as the world is, I wouldn't want to do miracles any more than he already has.
That's true. Remember, we're Cain in the story, right? So when he does the miracle, it's probably you that's dying.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever watched any atheist debates about the historical evidence for Christianity, but they generally just all fall back to, effectively, you can't believe anything that you hear from anyone else. They either apply a different standard of history to Christianity than they do any other history. Like, they're perfectly willing to believe the Roman Empire existed because, this one guy wrote this one thing and we have one copy of it from 600 years later. But Christianity, we have all these thousands of copies of things that were all written right after Jesus died, and we just can't believe those. That's just these religious fanatics writing stuff down. They were lying. That's generally how it goes. And so they end up trapped in this weird situation of basically claiming you can't trust anything anybody else has to say. And can you imagine anything more foolish than to say you cannot learn from the lives of others? And so the atheist then writes the book about how you can't trust the books that you read from other people.
Yeah,
because they want other people to learn what they had to say because they think they figured it out.
They basically contradict themselves.
It is absolutely a contradiction, but they don't see it.
Because they can't see it. That's kind of what's sad about it.
And now imagine, they assume that if someone wrote down a miracle, they were making it up for their own self-aggrandizement. But imagine if you actually did see a miracle. What would be your number one goal in life? For other people to know about it, right? You wouldn't see a miracle and then be like, I have got to never tell anybody about this ever, right? You would write it down, and you would try to get people to remember it. You would try to bring memory to this equation. And so Dennis Prager pointed out here that a very strong teaching in Judaism around the Exodus in the Passover, we're going to go through a Passover Seder next week, and a part of that Seder is that every single Jew is required to see themselves personally as if God rescued them out of Egypt. That is a key part of the ceremony. You see this miracle as having been done to you from the memory of the miracle. You were saved out of Egypt. And so if you have no memory, if you do not study the Exodus, then you just walk around accusing God of not acting in the world because you didn't bother to read all the times that he did act in the world, and so your attitude towards God is, what have you done for me lately? And God would then say, well, I gave 10 plagues, I rescued these people, I sent Jesus, he rose from the dead, right? I did all these things, you didn't bother to read it. And that's why you think I don't act as much as I do, because when I did act, you chose to not gain that memory. So that's why we're reading this today. There's another reason that memory is important, and that is that God is not happy he has to kill the firstborn of the Egyptians. He requires, in fact, the Jews are going to have to, for eternity, give him a firstborn. They owe him a firstborn, every single firstborn from here until the end of time, because he came down and took the firstborn of Egypt so they could be free. He's going to require every firstborn son to be consecrated to him, every firstborn animal to be consecrated to him, to be sacrificed to him. And I think we learn in that something that I learned about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that I realized all the victims that I saw from the great evils of the world had one common goal in mind, no matter what evil they survived. And their goal was, they just wanted somebody to know what had happened to them. If you are unjustly tortured for months and years on end, the singular thought that consumes you is, I just don't want it to be for nothing. If at least somebody can learn about what happened to me, maybe we can stop it from happening again. It becomes the obsession of your life. And if you were in that position, the same thing would happen to you. You want people to remember. the evil that happened to you. And here in this, God is not washing over the death of the firstborn. People have to remember that the Egyptian firstborn died that night when he came. And the Hebrews shouldn't treat that, they shouldn't take that for granted. I mean, how many movies do you see where the secret evil is going on, and the end of the movie, when everything's made right, is that it finally made it onto the news. And now everybody knows. And we go, okay. The world knows about the evil. In real life, it makes it on the news and we move on. You know, we don't care about the evil.
Yes.
But so many of us, that's how we are. And so that's why, you know, for me, I spent a significant amount of time. I thought if the victim, if that's what the victims want, then I, who am not the victim, have a duty to give it to them. And so it's my job to study the great evils of the world. I should know what happened to these people. And it turns out that's not completely true, because if you immerse yourself in the great evils of the world, you will get lost. You can only do it so much. But if you don't study evil at all, you don't fully understand God. Because you just see God as this moral monster in the Old Testament, extracting justice on people who you don't know what their crimes were. You don't know how bad humans can be to each other. And when you see how bad humans can really be to each other, all of a sudden you're crying out for God to come kill the firstborn, to wash the waters over the Egyptian army. This is the God we follow, the one who hates that evil. This ceremony that we're about to read, and I'm doing this little aside because most of the time you read the rules of the ceremonies and your eyes glaze over. And I want you to understand, when I'm done with this, I hope you have a newfound respect for Passover and the rules that we're about to read, because every one of them means something. And this is the reason the Jews exist today. None of the other empires that we're going to read about in this story still exist. No one from that time exists today except the Jews. If you took a Jew out of Egypt at that time, or well, maybe not that time, let's say about 100 years later in Jerusalem, and you plop him down in Jerusalem today, he would speak the same language, he would have the same festivals, and he would eat the same food. And there is no other culture in the world that you can say that about. And the reason that is because of this ceremony of Passover we're about to read right now. This is what kept the Jews alive. They didn't, if you had to pick one of them, the Hittites, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians, these were all massive empires and they're all gone. You would not have picked the people who had no homeland for 2,000 years to still exist 2,000 years later. But they do, and it's because of this ceremony. And there was a guy named Abraham Joshua Herschel who wrote a book in 1951 titled The Sabbath. And his great insight was that every other religion, every other god, every other nation creates cathedrals in space. We make buildings, we make places to worship. But Yahweh, the God of the Jews, created his cathedrals in time. The cathedral of Yahweh is the Sabbath and Passover. And Abraham Joshua Herschel said that these cathedrals in time were important because they were cathedrals that neither the Romans nor the Germans were able to burn. And that's why they're still here. Yahweh is a God of memory. So as you read through this, read it like an engineer. My job is to come up with a ritual that will still be practiced 3,500 years from now. How do we do that? Well, the Jews give us an answer here, or at least God does, because God came up with this ritual. Turns out he's kind of smart. If you want to remember something a long time, your ritual has to engage all 5 of your physical senses and your mind. So we're going to see that this involves sight. Everybody's dressed up. Everybody's ready to go. You got your staff in your hand. We're going to see this involves hearing. You're going to hear the breaking of the matzah, the cracker-like bread that we're going to eat, right? You're going to hear the singing that we do, the recitation of questions and things that happen later on. You've got taste, so you have to physically eat bitter herbs dipped in salt water. You eat horseradish root. Nobody forgets horseradish when they eat horseradish root. And so but you also have the wine, you have the matzah, the cracker, you have the delicious meal that you're eating, you have your sense of touch. There's these ritual hand washings that they go through where you're feeling the water washing over your skin once a year, every year, since this happened. And the smell, this roasted meat smell, right, of this lamb that's getting cooked. And during the ritual where you're all gathered together with your family, the kids are there, you're there, everybody has their role, and we read through this story and we engage the mind. We engage the children in the story so that they care, and then the whole night is spent explaining the purpose. And I want you to contrast this with our July 4th rituals in the United States. And this is how Israel kept their nation going for 3,500 years. So do we explain to our children every year on July 4th what made America distinctive? We eat hot dogs and hamburgers, we get taste. We get a day off of work, we watch fireworks. I don't know about you guys, but you smell the marijuana from the people at the city fireworks when you go try to watch it. That smell sticks with me from our July 4th. But our sights, our sounds, our tastes, our touches, our smells, they don't explain to us our heritage. They don't explain America. So our children don't know why we're here. They do not know what America is because they have no memory of the nation. We will not outlast the Jews. Our measly 250 years is a drop in the bucket from the history of the Jews. Basically, their rituals beat our rituals. That's what we're about to see. How do you make a ritual that goes for 3,500 years? And so now we see why we broke at the most dramatic point in the story. The whole point of the whole thing was the Passover. So we started with the calendar. I don't know about you guys, calendars confuse me. Okay, he tells them this will be the first month of the year for you. And he calls it later Abib, which was the Hebrew name for that calendar then. But after the Hebrews get taken to Babylon, they adopt all the Babylonian names for the months. So both Babylon and the Hebrews had a lunar calendar. And a lunar calendar actually makes way more sense than the calendar we have. It's actually a lunisolar calendar. But basically you just track the phases of the moon. So when the moon is like, I don't know if it's, new moon is like day one, and the next new moon is day one of the next month. And so it turns out that each month ends up with 29 or 30 days, depending on how long that new moon cycle takes. And so it's a really nice way to measure time. That's what God said he put it there for, was to measure time. But the problem is that there's only like 350 some days in that year. And so spring will keep moving through the months if you keep doing that without correcting it. So in the lunisolar calendar and the Babylonian calendar, this is so confusing. 7 out of 19 years, they add a month of 14 days. So we have a leap year where we have one day. They add a month, 7 out of 19 years, to try to keep spring happening in the spring month and fall happening in the fall month, basically. So this month is called Nisan in the Babylonian calendar. So this is the first of Nisan, will be their new year. And I thought, well, that was confusing enough. That's not actually when the Jews celebrate the new year. They celebrate the new year in Rosh Hashanah, which is the first of Tishrei, in the fall, at the harvest. So they actually have 2 new years. They have a new year for all of their festivals and all the religious practices that still starts on the 1st of Nisan, but they actually celebrate the new year at Rosh Hashanah in roughly August in the fall. So if you needed it to be any more confusing, there you go. So we did learn here that the Jews were preparing for Passover. It wasn't a last-minute thing, right? It wasn't like Moses just decided before Pharaoh, now we're going to do this. They'd been preparing since the 1st of Nisan. This is going to be the first of your month, and on the 10th you guys have to pick a lamb, and you got to keep it tied up in your house for 4 days. And then you're going to eat it. So why? I said every part of this ceremony has a reason. Why are you keeping the lamb for 4 days? Up to this point, Dennis Prager pointed out, there were no requirements made on the Hebrews. This is actually the first thing they're required to do. Up to now, they just had to continue living. And Yahweh had chosen them. First, they're going to sacrifice this animal to Yahweh. Okay? And we look at that as backwards and primitive, sacrificial system. But understand, the sacrificial system was about eating. And when you go to McDonald's and you order a Big Mac, there is absolutely no part of you that realizes an animal lost its life for you to eat the Big Mac. It is as unholy an act as you can possibly take, right? In the sacrificial system, when an animal died, you had to acknowledge the fact that an animal did die for me to eat this thing. Now, I'm a beef farmer and not a vegetarian. It's perfectly fine to eat it. But I do think there's a little more depth in life when you realize that your sustenance that did come from an animal, you know it came from the animal. When you go to McDonald's and order the Big Mac, you don't know. And so here God is making them sacrifice this lamb to them as food. You're going to eat this thing, but it's going to be in a holy religious context. So the family has to gather, put the lamb in the house, and wait with their mouths watering for 4 days to eat the delicious male year-old unblemished lamb. And that's probably not easy for a set of slaves to do, right? It's sort of like us pausing before a meal and we pray to God to force ourselves to take some delayed gratification. Their delayed gratification here is solely because Yahweh said to. They don't even know why they're doing it, right? He just said, take the lamb, keep it 4 days, don't eat it on this night. And the reason that's important is because they are about to face freedom in the way that David faced Goliath. And they are not prepared to face freedom. Freedom is their enemy as they go through the desert. In fact, you'll find none of these people survive it. They can't handle freedom because they don't have the mental faculties and capability to deal with being free people. This is something God has to pull the slavery out of them for 40 years. And so this is the beginning of that, though. This is the beginning of the test of willpower. Keep the lamb in your house and don't eat it just because I said so.
I'm thinking the kids would have gotten attached too, so there would have been some emotional bonding probably.
So I saw a couple commentators mention that. They were like, not only that, but he's Jeff, the little, pretty little lamb. Kids love him. It's like, okay, kids, time to kill Jeff. Probably back then, that might not have been the same as today. But anyways. The other thing that keeping that lamb 4 days in their house forced them to do is, what did Moses say would happen if they sacrificed one of their gods in Egypt? He said, they will stone us where we stand. The Egyptians will. And now, they're all going to tie up the sun god Ra, Amun-Ra, in their house for the sole purpose of sacrificing him in 4 days. Everybody knew about it. And so the Hebrew had to be more scared of Yahweh than he was of the Egyptians stoning them where they stood. And that actually has a big impact on the Egyptians because a lot of the Egyptians leave Egypt with them. And in fact, at this point, I guess I should say, the Egyptians are questioning, should I be following my gods or not? Because clearly Yahweh's in charge. And seeing all of the Hebrews take that lamb and having the Hebrews explain to them what was coming and what was going on was their chance out. It was their chance to be chosen too. That they could join with the Hebrews and be saved from this. So, now we can finally, verse 7. Then they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. A lintel, I know we use that word in everyday speech. I talk about my lintel all the time. It's the board above the door and like the 2 doorposts. That's what the lintel is. They shall eat the flesh that night, roasted on the fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall eat it. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled in water, but roasted, its head and its legs and its inner parts. And you shall let none of it remain until the morning. Anything that remains until the morning you shall burn. In this manner you shall eat it, with your belt fastened, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it in haste. It is Yahweh's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am Yahweh. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague will befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. So you have to kill and eat Egypt's gods. And by the end of the night, whatever's left, you have to burn it. Their gods are done hurting you by morning. That would be a very powerful ceremony. To sacrifice a god of Egypt to our God. But it turns out that being Hebrew is not what mattered. What would happen to a Hebrew if they did not put the lamb's blood on their door? They're dead. their firstborn dies. And we learn later there's rules for the sojourners staying with the Hebrews. What happens to an Egyptian who's in a house with the lamb's blood on the door? They survive.
I have a question, because I just thought about it the other day when I was watching that other movie. Is what about, like, okay, I'm a firstborn, but I don't live with my parents.
All the firstborn died.
So I'm like if I follow the rules and I put the blood on my doorstep if I had a kid, you know, my firstborn lives. Let's say my parents didn't do it. Do I die still, or?
No.
Per house.
It was per household. It was,
Per household?
It was
Okay.
per household because it was explicitly per household. So that's a good question, though. But it was
You got
just
some
every household
grandparents
that
that are
doesn't
like,
have the
"Huh?"
lamb is done. So
I think,
yeah.
Small grandpa
did
with
they
dementia
eat
forgets to do
meat
it.
other times?
Did the Hebrews eat meat?
Yeah.
Yes, they did. That's
So
part of
this
why the
was-
Egyptians saw them as abominations.
So they would have eaten lamb on a regular basis?
Yes, they would have eaten lamb. They would have eaten that, but not sacrificed to Yahweh. Right? Like that's the key. This right now is in this holy context that I'm specifically sacrificing this God to my God. And it's done conspicuously. Everybody in the land of Goshen, everybody sees it. But because they were, when we hit the point where it said, and Joseph came into Egypt and he told his brothers to go settle in Goshen because the Egyptians will see you as abominations because you're shepherds. The reason they were abominations is because they might have ever eaten meat that was one of the gods of Egypt. And so that's why the Egyptians would not touch foreigners, because they felt the foreigners were unclean. Because they might have eaten from a cow. They might have eaten a lamb. The Egyptians did eat meat. It's just they didn't eat the meat of these particular animals that were their gods. They didn't eat the lamb. They didn't eat the cows. But they would eat goats. And so, like, because I looked that up, it was a question of mine. I was like, well, then were the Egyptians all vegetarians or what? But they weren't. They just didn't eat those particular ones. And so the lamb here was specifically calling out Ra. That's a good question.
And I thought verse 4, I don't know, it had never stood out to me before. Because even though they were all terrified, they knew something horrible was coming, they still had to look out for their neighbors and to not just think about their household, because it says, if a household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people that there are. Because that is interesting, because we have a habit of, if you have something scary happening, or you only think about you and yours, but this, they specifically had to think about whoever was closest to them, if they had a smaller household than they did, and making sure.
That's a good point, and that has continued all the way to this day. They have rules. I think it's 10 people. Anything over 10 people needs another lamb or something like that. Like they codified that into very specific numbers. But you're right. We all had to work together here. But we learn from the God of the 10 plagues here, because it was not their racial heritage, it was not the fact that he chose their group that saved them. It was that there is a chosen group, and they're it by default, but they have to do what God says. And you can become a part of the chosen group if you also put your faith in Yahweh and do what he said, right? You as an Egyptian can be saved from this if you join the Hebrews, get adopted into their family, go into their household. And why do you go into the household? Not just to see what would happen. You're not saved then. You go into their household with the lamb's blood on the door because you have faith in Yahweh now, right? You are trusting Yahweh. That's your sign. I trust Yahweh too. And so in this very ritual, the very first one, we learn that the Hebrews themselves deserved the death of the firstborn as well. You remember the Hebrew that was beating his own kinsmen? They weren't any better than the Egyptians. They just weren't in power. The Egyptians were in power, and if you'd have flipped roles, the Israelites would have been doing the same thing to the Egyptians. God didn't pick them because of their awesomeness. He picked them because they were weak, and through them he could enact this story. The 10 plagues show us that he hates evil enough to punish it. So we learn here we're all sinners, we all deserve death, but if we just put an unblemished lamb's blood on the door that was sacrificed to Yahweh, and we eat its body as a sign that we trust Yahweh, then we will be saved from the natural punishment for our sin, which is death. And if he picks us, but we don't trust him enough to use the blood of the lamb and eat its body, then we won't be saved. So the Hebrews at this time that didn't put the lamb's blood on their doorpost were double sinners. They were double sinners because they willingly ignored the gift of the lamb that God had gave them. It wasn't just they deserved the death of the firstborn first. They've sinned again now. Because God said, you can escape this. Just do this. And you can escape it. And they didn't even do that. So, verse 14. This day shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations as a statute forever. You shall keep it as a feast. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven out of your houses, for if anyone eats what is leavened from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. On the first day you shall hold a holy assembly, and on the 7th day a holy assembly. No work shall be done on those days. But what everyone needs to eat, that alone may be prepared by you. And you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your hosts out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a statute forever. In the first month, from the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. See the multiples of 7, 14th, 21st. For 7 days, no leaven is to be found in your houses. If anyone eats what is leavened, that person will be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he is a sojourner or a native of the land. You shall eat nothing leavened in all your dwelling places. You shall eat unleavened bread. So if I asked you to make a ritual that would last 3,500 years, I doubt any of us would have said, you know what the key is? Ban yeast. That's the key. Like, what's the deal with the leaven here? Modern Jews still adhere to this. On the first day, they actually hide cakes and bread throughout their house, and the kids go find them all, and then they ceremonially burn it, so that way they can enact this story out. That's part of the ritual that they do right now. So they still do it, but what in the world is wrong with leaven? Later on in Deuteronomy it says that, well, they didn't have time for the bread to rise. We've all heard that. It makes no sense at all. Okay, so first of all, they had 4 days for the lamb to come. It doesn't take much more than about 3 hours for your bread to rise. So they had plenty of time to make bread preparing for the Passover. It didn't just come on them suddenly. When they did not have time for it to rise was from the 15th of Nisan, that morning, when they leave, until Pharaoh's army is destroyed in the Red Sea. Now they're constantly on the move. We don't have time to stop for 3 hours and wait on bread to rise. So there was some element of, we're in a hurry, and we can't let the bread rise. But this festival here, this ritual, this is not fast. It's not, the Jews didn't have unleavened bread on their journey because they had meticulously removed all the leaven from the desert. It's because they didn't have time for it to rise. And the ceremony here is you can't have any leaven in your house. And if you do, if you eat something leavened, you are cut off from Israel. Dennis Prager made the point, that sounds like capital punishment for jaywalking. What? Something doesn't seem to fit. How can it be? If it's just that I remember they were in a hurry, how is that the point of this? And I would argue it's not. And I'm not the only person arguing this. It's not. Leaven throughout the Bible represents death, decay, and sin. Okay? Like, what happens when something dies is the yeast takes over. The instant they die, yeasts start acting inside the body to decay it. Yeast is a process of decay. If you need a sourdough starter, for example, to make your bread, and you don't have one, you just mix up some water and flour in a jar and leave it sit for about 1 to 2 weeks. And it'll eventually start bubbling. That's just the yeast that's in the air starting to eat the flour and burping carbon dioxide and starting to make the bubbles. And that's what leavening is. And so it's a sign of decay. It's a sign of death. The symbol that you have to completely remove from your house. You have to do a deep clean of your house. You have to find everything and you have to burn it so that you can see before your very eyes there is no death in this house. It's gone. And remember that these people are leaving Egypt Egypt was a civilization that reveled in death and the afterlife. That's what they worshipped. Their greatest sign to the world was tombs, right? When you think Egypt, you think pyramids. Pyramids are tombs. That's where they buried their pharaohs. They all aspired to be Osiris. Remember the god of the underworld. That's who they wanted to be. Their chief text in their religion is named the Book of the Dead. These Hebrews are leaving the culture of death. And this here, when you remove leaven from your house, God is teaching them that He is a God of life. And the death cult of Egypt has to be ritually pulled out of you. Egypt was death, decay, slavery. God is life, freedom, and growth. That's who Yahweh is. And this ritual is teaching you that every single year. You are not allowed to let the lamb decompose. Because if you leave a little bit of leaven in your house, as Paul says, a little bit of leaven leavens the whole lump. Leaven multiplies. Yeast multiplies if you leave it alone. So you clean every bit of it out of your house so that that lamb's body in your house will never see decay. And it will be eaten, and when it's done, you will burn it. There will not be a bit left. It will never see decay. God, Yahweh, is a God of life and liberty. And so then the last thing, what does cut off mean? It sounds bad. What is it? And the answer is, no one has a clear answer, unfortunately. We don't actually fully know what it is. If you look at the modern commentators, they mean you were expelled from the community. You were kicked out. But like the Amish today, if somebody breaks some of the rules and they get kicked out of the community, you just can't talk to them anymore. That seems to be a modern invention. It doesn't seem to be what was actually going on at the time. If you look at the ancient rabbis who wrote the Talmud, which would have been after the temple was destroyed in AD 70, those rabbis argued that it was purely a God-delivered punishment, because we don't see it in the English, but the word used here for what gets cut off is it says his soul will be cut off from Israel, from his people. It's not just him, it's his soul. When his soul is not in this world. So it shouldn't be a this worldly punishment if it's his soul getting cut off. But they argued that it meant God was going to prematurely end their life. That they were going to die. They actually had a number to it. You would die between 50 and 60 if you had been cut off from Israel, and you would die between 70 and 80 if you had not been cut off from Israel. And odds are you'd have no descendants. That's what they thought it was. I don't think that's it at all. That makes no sense at all. Do you know what it is? I think this is obviously what it is. You're no longer a child of the promise. If you willingly did not do what God said to do, if you broke what He said to do to remember this event, you're throwing your lot in with Esau. You were still a descendant of Abraham, but you're not a child of the promise anymore. You're no longer with Jacob. The ones with Jacob are the ones that did what Yahweh told them to do. They kept the Passover throughout all of eternity. So to be cut off from your people is a sin against God, and only God enacts it. And that's important because it means we don't kill people who don't agree with us religiously. It means God will take care of it. There are 19 things in the Bible, in the entire Bible, that you can do to get you cut off from God, and every one of them, or cut off from Israel, every one of them is a sin against God. Not a single one of them is a sin against another human being. God takes care of this. But if you are the one being cut off, be aware, God is taking care of this. You've just stacked up His wrath for the final day of judgment. You don't want to be there. But is this really a punishment? Is it a punishment to be cut off from Israel? If you voluntarily said, I'm not going to do what it takes to be a member of the nation of Israel. God told me to put lamb on my door, and I'm not going to do it. If you buy a new gadget at the store and you don't read the manual for how it works, or you read the manual and you don't do what it says, are you then surprised when you can't put it together? Is it a punishment that you can't put it together and make the thing work? It's not a punishment, it's a consequence. It's just what happens. If you didn't do what the manual said, you don't end up with the working gadget. And this is the fundamental thing that non-Christians do not understand about Christianity. They think our religion says you're going to hell if you're not a Christian. Because most other religions say if you're not a member of our religion, you're bad. But our answer to them is that is not why you're going to hell at all. You're going to hell because you're a sinner. You're just not escaping hell because you're not a Christian. God gave you a manual, and you either refuse to read it or you refuse to repent and trust in Him because that's what He told you to do. That was it. And you just said, I won't do it. So is that a punishment? Is God punishing you when you said, I'm not going to do the thing He told me to do? I think it's much more of a consequence than a punishment. So we'll stop there for today.